This is episode 50 of the Fitness and Post podcast. To access the show notes for this episode, please visit fitnessandpost.com/50. Before getting to today's episode, I'd like to thank our sponsor Geek Desk, who produces one of the highest quality height-adjustable standing workstations on the market. I own one myself and love the fact that I can choose to sit or stand at the simple push of a button. They're super durable, yet light enough that I've carried them and set them up on my own at several job locations. To learn more about Geek Desk, visit fitnessandpost.com/geekdesk. My name is Zach Arnold, and I'm the creator of Fitness and Post. You may know me as Empire Editor on Twitter. I spent the last 10 years working long hours in a dark room and battled numerous health problems because of my less than ideal work environment, and that's what led me to building Fitness and Post. Whether you work in film and television post-production like me, or you're a designer, programmer, or anyone working a sedentary job all day, we bring you the practical tips, tools, and resources to bring health and wellness back into your life. You spent all day fixing it in post, now it's time to Fitness in Post. Hello and welcome to the Fitness in Post podcast, where it is my mission to share the best resources that I can find to help you optimize the best operating system that you have on the planet, yourself. My guest today is Jim Reed. Jim is a former colleague of mine. He's one of the first people that I met and worked with when I moved out to Los Angeles over 13 years ago now, and holy cow, am I date myself. And I still consider him one of the most talented and visionary graphic designers that I've ever worked with. He is a creative director, dad, and cyclist who started his professional career in graphic design, primarily creating movie advertising, and then he shifted into trailers, TV, and film projects. He's worked with many clients, including TV networks, filmmakers, and agencies. In the last 4 years, struggling with a stressful job and overweight, he rediscovered cycling as a passion and now races in Masters as a Cat 3 road cyclist and on the mountain bike as a Cat 2. And those are so cool, I don't even know what they mean, but he's going to tell us all about it. Our conversation today is all about Jim's life as a designer, father of 3, and now a competitive cyclist, how he made the choice to jump into a competitive sport like cycling, and how he balances his schedule to accommodate both a demanding career and an equally demanding training schedule. But before we get to our interview, I wanted to let you know about a few announcements. First, I would like to remind everyone about this month's giveaway for a free Geek Desk height-adjustable workstation valued at over $1,000. It literally takes less than 5 minutes to enter and there's no purchase necessary. The contest runs through September 30th. To learn more, just visit fitnessandpost.com/win. Next, I'd like to remind all of my loyal listeners about using our special Amazon link to make all of your Amazon purchases to help support the Fitness and Post program. All you have to do is visit fitnessandpost.com/Amazon. That's it. Super simple. Amazon will then donate 5% of your purchase to the program, and you literally don't pay a cent. So, if you enjoy this show and you hope to hear more episodes in the future, please write yourself a reminder to bookmark fitnessandpost.com/Amazon as your new Amazon homepage, and I thank you so much for your support. Lastly, I have a lot of new listeners after last week's episode with Monica Daniel, where we talk about her journey from cutting reality TV to working in scripted. So, welcome new listeners. If you're not aware, we are building a community of like-minded fitness and posters over on Facebook. So if you'd like to join the revolution and start a conversation with us, just visit fitnessandpost.com/Facebook. And now, without further ado, my interview with Jim Reed. So I'm here today with Jim Reed, and you got kind of a bit of a background on Jim when I gave his bio before in the show intro. But what I failed to mention is that Jim is a Renaissance man / badass. He's somebody that I met, actually one of the very first people I ever met in Los Angeles in the film industry when I was working as an assistant editor at this little independent trailer house. And Jim may not remember this, but he's one of the first people to ever call me out on my giant head and my bull. Where I was, and I'm sure Jim's like, yeah, that sounds about like me, right? But I was just this big-headed college graduate that thought, yeah, no, I'm an editor and a graphic designer because I spent a semester using After Effects, and you were just like, yeah, you're not a designer, and you started showing me stuff, and it completely blew my mind on how little I knew and how far I had to go. And that is a lesson that has stuck with me for 15 years. So I appreciate you having brought that to my attention, and it's really made a big difference on me. So welcome to the show, Jim.
Oh, I'm glad to be here, Zach. Thanks for having me on. And it was a pleasure working with you back in the day. Just being young and green and fresh and full of energy. It's working with the young upstarts that make this whole thing fun and worthwhile. So yeah, and obviously you've kept it up and done really well for yourself, kicking ass.
Well, I appreciate that.
So nice job.
Yeah, thank you. So before we start to get into some of the nitty gritty, I just want to give people a little bit of a background of kind of what your day to day looks like, kind of what keeps you busy, and then kind of incorporate on top of the professional stuff like the design work, your schedules and stuff, just kind of what you're doing outside of that is more fitness and post related.
Sure. I feel like I have three lives almost. First, I'm a dad. I have three awesome kids, 8, 6, and 4. And that's insane. I mean, I have so much fun with those guys, and it takes a lot of time. It's a huge deal. You have one child, then that seems somewhat manageable. Then 2 is not as manageable, and then 3, you're outnumbered, and you're pretty much hosed. So my approach with that is just roll with it and have fun, and that's been amazing. But that's job number 1. Job number 2 is I work in advertising. I work at an experiential agency, so I get to think of and produce interesting and wild stunts. And then my third job is cycling. I treat it pretty seriously. I train pretty seriously. Having all three and trying to balance and manage all three doesn't always work out.
Yeah, that's something that I can relate to as well. I don't have 3 kids, and that just kind of blows my mind how that's even remotely possible, given that you're also doing athletics and working in this industry. So, but you're right. It's like with one, you're like, whoa, this is kind of overwhelming. But then you get into the thing, you get into the swing of it, and you're like, oh, this isn't so bad. I can manage it. And then you have the second one, and you're like, what just happened to my life? Oh my God, like it's not twice as hard, it's like 6 times as hard. And I don't understand the math behind that, but you talk to anybody that's just had their second kid and they're like, what in the world has happened to my life? So I can't even imagine what happens with the third. But the fact that you're balancing all of that is really fantastic. And the thing that I'm the most interested, obviously, is how you're finding a way to balance all of these 3 and find a way to be when you're not a Tour de France cyclist. But I follow you on Facebook and I see the stuff you're doing. You're not a guy that jumps on a mountain bike and does 20 miles around town. Like, you take this seriously. So talk a little bit specifically about that side of things.
Sure. Yeah, I came into cycling. I guess I discovered cycling again a few years ago, and I think, like a lot of your guests on this show, I had put in probably 15 years of sitting behind a desk and not exercising enough, and had put on a lot of weight. And that's just what's going to happen when you eat a lot. Eat unhealthy foods, let your emotions maybe drive some of those eating habits, which can be really stressful in a creative work environment. Entertainment's a tough business. We work really long hours, and a lot of folks don't fully understand. While it's amazing and fun, and I couldn't imagine working on anything else, we put in so much time, and especially early in the career when you're really figuring a lot of stuff out. So the first thing that goes is exercise just gets tossed out the window. So I had gained a lot of weight, and I wasn't feeling very healthy in my life. I was maybe drinking a little bit too much, staying out too late, not making good food choices, and it was around Thanksgiving, maybe 4 years ago, and I just decided, enough. Enough of this. This is not working for me. Looked at myself in the mirror and I couldn't believe what I'd seen. And, I was imagining in my mind, if this is what I look like now, what's going to happen 10 years from now? This just, something snapped, and I realized I needed to do something about it. And I was like, well, what can I tolerate? What can I do that would at least be fun? I'm not a huge fan of going to the gym. It just, the motivation to work out, I knew I needed to find a motivation to work out. So I discovered my local YMCA, and it had offered spin classes. So I started going to spin classes. And when I went to spin class, I went with real focus to kick ass, to work very hard. I didn't really know much what I was doing, and I followed and went along with the classes. And I just, found that I was working a lot harder than maybe even the instructors. And that started by, and I'm super competitive too. And that kind of helped keep my motivation high. One of the things I noticed is, hey, that's cool. It keeps track of your calories that you burned. Okay, wow, that was a really hard spin class, and I just flipped the calorie counter. So that's cool. Okay, so how fast can I flip the calorie counter? So basically, how hard can I work to flip the calorie counter, break that 1,000 mark as early on in the class as possible. So then I started doing that, and then I started doing 2 classes in a row. And, the people there thought I was a little nuts. There are a lot of older retired people, and I was, this 40-year-old guy who's rediscovered cycling, and I'm treating it a little bit like a race. And that's when I realized, like, hey, maybe I should get outside and, keep the momentum, keep excited about cycling. And honestly, I'm getting a little bored of just spinning on an exercise bike in a class. But the class is great. You have people around you, and that definitely helped. And I found the instructors that I liked, and they've since become good friends. So, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 months of spin classes. And then I was like, well, I'll sign up for a race. Let me go and check it out. And so I go online, I start looking around. I found a local cycling club, and I found a bunch of races, and I was like, oh, this race looks really cool. It's called Killington Stage Race, and it's 3 days of racing, a TT, a circuit race, and a huge road race with a massive climb. And I just had no idea. I had no idea what I was getting into, but it looked pretty awesome, and it was in Vermont, and I love Vermont. So I was like, sure, I'll sign up for that. And I didn't even at that point have a real road bike. I asked my brother to send me his old TT bike, and I started riding that around. And I mean, just thinking about that now is just insane. But you work with what you have. So I remember going out thinking like, oh, I should try and ride 100 miles. 100 miles sounds like a lot. Why not challenge myself with that on a TT bike? That was just insane. I probably crippled myself for a week trying to do that. And I did. I rode pretty slow, and the gearing's totally not right. And, it's completely the wrong bike to do something like that on. But I did it. And that all fed into a lot of really positive kind of momentum. I went and did Killington Stage Race and pretty much got my ass kicked, but I loved every moment of it. And I mean, I made all the wrong mistakes, but I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, all the classic mistakes in cycling, in racing for, if you're trying to win. But I actually had pretty goodness in that.
So sorry about that quick interruption. We had a little bit of a connection failure, and you'll notice that Jim's his audio quality is a little bit different, but the story's just as awesome. So sorry for the interruption, Jim. Go ahead and continue.
Yeah, so that kicked off after Killington. That kicked off my, I guess, cycling racing career, and I committed pretty intensely to keep up training, learn more about cycling training, and read a lot. And mostly it's to stay motivated, to stay healthy. I found the thing that I like doing, even though it takes hours. I'm on the bike, probably between, 7 hours is a very short training week, up to about 20 hours would be a heavy training week. I found something I loved, and it worked. It's kept me motivated, helped bring the weight off. And, honestly, I use that. I'm burning so many calories that even if I have a bad nutrition day, it's not really that big a deal.
But I'm sure that when you have a bad nutrition day, you also definitely feel it, because when you're doing those kinds of hours, And all of a sudden you're just, oh, I'm going to go out and have burgers and fries and a couple of beers. And the next day you train, you're like, oh my God, that was the worst decision ever.
Yeah, I can tolerate things pretty well. There are some things I stay away from, but honestly, after a really hard ride, a calorie dense meal, if there's a lot of red meat in there and some fat, I'm not afraid of that. And when you need to get the calories in, my favorite thing post a really hard ride is chocolate milk. Yeah, chocolate milk is an amazing recovery drink. A lot of protein, a lot of calories, and you get them in right away. One of the things that we try and do after a hard ride is to restore glycogen. Get those calories into a usable form of energy back into the muscles, because the kind of riding we do on those hard days really empties you. And if you're going to go hard again the next day in those kind of higher power zones, you need your tanks topped off.
Yeah, I mean, that all that stuff makes complete sense. And the part that I really want to go into is about developing that motivation, how that motivation was developed, how to keep it up, and also how to balance the time that you're spending on the cycle with your family. But before going into that, I want to do a quick tangent just as a place for people to start with a story like this. Are you familiar with Rich Roll?
Rich Roll, no. Mm-mm.
Okay, you need to find this guy immediately, because you're going to look at his story and say, this guy's my hero. He's basically, he's an acquaintance of mine. I've been following his work. He was an entertainment attorney that had the exact same epiphany that you did at the age of 40, where he couldn't walk up a flight of steps. He was probably, I don't know, 210, 215 pounds. And he realized, this is not the life that I wanted to lead, and I want to change it. And he became an ultra endurance athlete and was named one of the 20 fittest men on the planet. He did something that he called the Epic Five, where he did 5 triathlon distance races on all 5 islands of Hawaii in 7 days. And this is a guy that was an entertainment attorney that couldn't walk up the steps, and he did it by becoming plant powered. So he became 100% vegan and completely reshaped his life. It's one of the most inspiring and amazing stories I've ever heard, and I'm hoping to have him on the show soon. But just go to richroll.com or just go on Amazon. You need to read the book Finding Ultra, because your story is almost identical to his, the way you're talking about power zones and I had no idea how to get on the bike. Like, this is a guy that you're going to look at his story and say, I can go to the next level. This is for anybody, not just for you specifically. But if you just read Finding Ultra, it's one of the best books I've ever read. It's like a 2-day read, just a couple hours a day. It's fantastic. You will love it. And for anybody else listening, check out this guy, richroll.com, or look up Finding Ultra. Really, really good, just motivation for saying, I want to make a change. And like you did it in an extreme way. So what I want to do is go back to that day where you looked in the mirror and said, enough is enough. And I'm a really firm believer that if you look in the mirror and say, oh, I don't like the way that I look, I need to lose 10 pounds. So I'm going to find a diet and exercise program that says I can lose 10 pounds in 90 days. That clearly doesn't work. And research proves that like 95+% of people fail when they do that. And I feel that your motivation has to be much bigger than, ooh, I want to lose a pant size. And for me personally, it's all about being able to function better as an editor and being a high performer, and even more importantly, being a much better father to my kids and being present. So what are the deeper things that you found when you started digging into your motivation that got you from where you were to doing 20 hours of cycling a week?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a really good point. I had tried, traditional quote unquote diets, and I don't like to speak ill of them or any of the current trending diets. They may work for some people. It didn't work for me. I needed to identify a motivation and start generating momentum. Momentum is so important and has been really important in my fitness and in the beginning of my weight loss. Now my weight loss is less of I guess by finding something that I liked doing that expended a lot of energy, I didn't even much have to think about the fact that I was on a diet. I mean, at first I did some pretty extreme changes in my diet to kind of kickstart things. And I don't recommend this to anyone. Essentially what I did what I had figured out with myself is that, a traditional approach to dieting wasn't going to work, partially because of my own unique psychology, which is I love food a lot, probably too much. And so what I did for myself is I fasted all day and then ate whatever I wanted for dinner. And I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. It's not a diet that's probably documented.
That's like the worst advice ever for anybody listening. For the love of God, don't do that. But carry on.
Well, I think my point is that different things work for different people for different reasons. So for me, once I start eating, the floodgate is open, at least at that time, with what I was dealing with at the time, with, the stress of working and how many hours I was working. And why that worked for me is, and you think you can't do it, but, after 2 or 3 days, you really can tolerate a lot more hunger than you might think. So I was running at a pretty steep calorie deficit. I lost 45 pounds in 6 weeks, which is pretty,
Wow.
yeah, it's pretty extreme. Then once I hit like 40, 45 pounds, of weight loss, it became much harder. That trick stopped working. But what I did is I phased in smaller meals, portion control, and at that point, I feel like I don't exactly know what was going on in my body and psychologically, but I had generated that momentum. I had lost the weight. I was on this cycling program that I really enjoyed. And I kind of returned to probably a much healthier, more normal way of eating, just paying attention to eating whole, real foods that I cook myself. I love cooking. I'm the cook in the family. That made things a little bit easier because I could control what we were eating at mealtime. I think it can be really tough when, if you're not the cook, you have no idea what's going into what you're eating. Zach, I don't know how you manage lunches around post-production facilities and all the snacks around post houses. It's impossible, man. How do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically an art form in and of itself. And speaking of art forms, I'll just put an aside to your story that when you say you're the cook in the family, when I say I'm the cook in the family, that means that I'll make my kids chicken and vegetables and whatnot. Like, people need to understand you are a chef. You are an artisan. You developed an entire food app around these amazing recipes. So when you say you love food, that doesn't mean you gorge on cheeseburgers and Doritos. Like, you are an artist when it comes to food. And I can't even imagine how hard it would be to take something you're so passionate about and remove that from your life and say, well, I just can't eat all this stuff during the day and have one meal at night. So I can't even imagine the mental power that it takes to do that. But the way that I manage food at the office now, and this is something that has taken me years of experimentation, is that I just don't order anymore. The show I'm on right now, Empire, they have the budget to get everybody lunch every day, and that's basically because they don't want to let us leave. And that's not that uncommon in post-production, where it's gotten to the point where the people running the department are saying, well, I don't really want them to walk outside and get fresh air for like a whole hour. Like, we can't afford that. So let's just give them their lunches, and then they can eat their lunch in front of their workstation and keep going, and we never lose them. And I refuse to just be a part of that philosophy. So I almost never, and I say almost because there are days when it just isn't possible, but I almost never eat in front of my workstation. But I bring in my own food. And what I've done on Empire specifically, because they are paying for the food, is I just went to them and said, listen, I don't want to be eating takeout every single day. It's going to affect my performance, and I have a fairly strict diet, and I don't want you guys to have to worry about my finicky tastes. Whatever your budget is per day, I just want to be reimbursed that for the food that I bring. And they kind of looked at me when I proposed that season 1, like, are you crazy? And I said, well, no, this is the way that we're just going to do it. I'm not asking you. I'm saying this is what we're doing. And every once in a while, I will order out if it's like a Friday and it's, been a fun day and I sent out a cut and everybody loved it. It's like, all right, I'll get a burger with the group, right? But I manage that very much. And at this point, I probably order out maybe 2-3 times a month. So budgetary wise, I'm actually not spending money on the food that I bring. And I will either batch cook on a Sunday where I'll just make a couple of meals where I know very specifically what's going into them, very simple meals, healthy meals, and I'll just eat the same thing all week long. Or I'll use a food delivery service that cooks the meals and I know that it's fresh ingredients and that it's some are organic, some are not. But it's not like it's not like a lean cuisine where you look at the back of it and there's 50 ingredients, you don't know what they are. Like I'll have like 4 ingredients on these meals. Right now I use a service called Freshly, and I'll put a link in the show notes if anybody is interested in looking into Freshly, because I just have a meal in front of me every day. It's different. Like it'll be salmon and vegetables. It'll be, like they're really, really good meals. It's not the kind of thing you would expect from an order service, but it's basically being paid for the way that any other lunch from Chipotle or, the Japanese place or the Chinese place, but I know what's in my food. So that's how I manage that part. And as far as the snacks, there's a kitchen. There's actually 2 kitchens that we have at Empire, and one of them you walk in and it's just a wall of all of this stuff. Fair portion of it is really bad. Some of it is good. I just don't go in there. I get water from a different room. Like there's another office on the side that doesn't have any food. It's just more of a utility kitchen that has like dishes and the coffee maker, but it doesn't have anything in it. People don't congregate there. So I just don't allow myself to get the bad stuff within my field of vision, because I know as soon as I see it, the temptation is going to strike, and I bring my own snacks as well. So I make sure that in my office or, on the desk right outside the office, we have this little common area with snacks. I just make sure I never have the bad stuff in my field of vision. And if I'm hungry, I just go to where my snacks are. And now I'm not tempted to eat the bad stuff. Because if you don't actually see the bag of Doritos, you usually aren't saying, oh my God, I need the Doritos, I need the Doritos. But as soon as you see them, that's when the brain is triggered to say, that's what I want.
Yeah, totally. And that's a really good point. And I find for myself too, just at home, if we don't have it around, I don't eat it and the kids don't eat it and the family doesn't eat it. So, I'm also the primary grocery shopper. So I just make sure that stuff just isn't around. And then guess what? You don't really miss it. If you can, instead of, the bag of Doritos, we're huge nut fans. So we have, we buy nuts in bulk and we have tons of them around at all times. And, dried fruit, between that and dried fruit, the kids love it. They don't miss the Doritos. They don't need it. And it's just way easier because you're not tempted to maybe go down that road if that bag of Doritos is around. And I've done that, man. If that bag of Cool Ranch is around, it's just a dangerous thing. It's a loaded gun.
Exactly. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize, is that we in our entire society have this massive addiction to food, but we don't actually realize it's an addiction, which is why it's so powerful. If you smoke cigarettes, you're addicted to cigarettes. Like there's no doubt about it. You're not thinking, oh no, I'm not addicted. Like that it's an addiction. But when you're eating the Doritos every day or the Fruit Loops for breakfast or whatever it is, these are addictive substances that fMRI brain scans prove are activating the same pleasure centers in your brain as doing cocaine or heroin. But when people don't understand that that's actually the case, they don't realize there's that addiction. And you and I grew up in similar generations where that's just the way that you lived, was you had a bowl of Fruit Loops for breakfast, and then you had your sugary yogurt, and you had your peanut butter and jelly sandwich on Wonder Bread, and it's just all this addictive stuff. So now when you get to the point where we are, and I'm sure you've gone through this as well, that never goes away and gets out of your brain. Like I didn't grow up eating healthy. I didn't figure any of this out until a few years ago. So there are still times where I'm like, man, I could go for a bowl of Fruity Pebbles for dinner right now, right? It doesn't go away. I don't know if you deal with that same struggle, but I constantly have that struggle just because that's what's been in my brain for 35 years.
Yeah, and that's to circle it back to momentum. You have a habit or you've done something for a while, and at least for me, I'm sure everyone's different on the spectrum, is, once I do something for like a couple of weeks, then whether it's a positive thing or a negative thing, it's in there and it may be part of the routine. So for me, I've noticed that I'm really powerfully drawn to that routine. And if I can keep it positive, then things stay great. And we've worked up momentum in a good direction. And that's awesome. Right now, I have to confess, Zach, my momentum this week has been terrible. It started with a bike race on Saturday where I got my ass handed to me. It was really, really difficult. And I needed a day and a half to recover. Combine that with a few other work and family related things. I have not been on the bike once this week. So it's okay. You need time to rest and recover psychologically, physically. So in my training calendar, I'm calling this an easy week, and the weekend is coming up, and I know I'm going to have some time to put in some quality rides, but there are bad weeks too. And it's cool because the things go in cycles, and you're going to have a down week, you're going to have an up week. And the larger thing that I try and pay attention to is that longer term cycle. So we're going to talk about digital tools for a little bit here, if that's cool with you. There are a couple of
I love geeking out. Love it.
Great. Yeah, let's geek it out with a couple of amazing digital tools for cycling and for running as well. I use an online service called Strava, and I also use a service called Training Peaks. Both of them I use to track my fitness progression in slightly different ways. Strava, if you're not familiar with it, it's very community and socially driven. It has a lot of technical goodies in there as well, but it's more of a camaraderie thing. And they have things called KOMs, which, if you want to be the fastest person up your local hill, it'll keep track of that, which is great for motivation. Training Peaks is a pretty serious tool. I'm lucky that I work with an amazing coach. The coaches at Cycle Smart, and I work with them. My coach Jacob lives in West Virginia. I upload all my data, which is recorded into a GPS computer, and all of that data is tracked in the aggregate, so Jacob can log in and see where I'm at and, dial in my plan for the rest of the week, the rest of the month, adjusting things around races so that we're moving in a positive direction. And you can get really nerdy with this stuff. I was maybe fortunate because I, started this cycling thing kind of so late that I had done the research and committed to buying a bike that has a power meter. And that's a big deal. Power meters are really expensive, so that took up a huge chunk of the budget that I had. And for gear weenies, if you're a gear weenie, road cycling is like the best thing you could possibly be involved with because it's just insane. The bikes are incredible. They're, made out of really fancy materials. They're getting more and more aerodynamic. They're really incredible machines. So I committed to a system that had a power meter, and these are the same power meters that pros are using to track training. And the reason why power meters are important in training is they will measure your true power output, and that's measurable in watts. And if you are tracking the different things you can track, like heart rate and miles and speed and all that stuff, it's great. But power is the one that gives you a true indication of your performance. Speed is just a result of pedaling really hard, and how hard you can pedal and how hard I can pedal are going to be impacted by a lot of variables, genetics, size, weight, biomechanics of how you fit on a bicycle, your aerodynamics, your bike's aerodynamics. So power kind of levels all of that stuff out so that you can look at your performance in a way that many of the coaches kind of know and understand. So when I'm out on a ride, if it's a training ride, I'm paying pretty close attention to how much power I'm outputting. So yeah, you can get pretty geeky with the cycling stuff.
Yeah, I'm definitely familiar with both of those sites and apps. I'm not a cyclist myself, so I don't use Strava. But anytime anybody will contact me and say, "Hey, Fitness and Post is great, but I don't really want to be in the Fitbit leaderboard. I'm not much of a runner, but I'm a cyclist. What can I do?" And I say, "Jump on Strava. It's the number one place if you're going to be on a bike and you want to be able to quantify." And like you said, there's the social aspect. I've also gone to Training Peaks. I haven't subscribed myself, but it is serious business, like you said, and that's where the triathletes go and the professional cyclists go. Like, if you really want to do this right, that is the place to quantify your information and your activity. So I'm familiar with it. And again, I'll put links in the show notes to all this stuff. So if you're listening and saying, "Oh, I don't know how to find these," everything will be there right in the links. But what I want to do now is take everything you've talked about so far and I want to start breaking it down. I'm a really big fan of kind of reverse engineering how you got where you are. Because if listeners are listening to this, or even I'm listening to this and saying, "Now, wait a second, you've got 3 kids, you are working a high stress job in the entertainment industry, you have the same amount of time in the day that I do. So where are you putting in those 20 hours a week? And what are the habits and systems and rituals that are allowing you to do that?" That to me are the action steps that somebody can actually walk away with and say, "Oh, well, if I break it down, I can start to see how I could get there too if I want to." So kind of what is the path from the point where you said, "I'm 45 pounds overweight and I have 3 kids," to "I can actually make this work and find the time during the week and balance everything"?
Oh, it's easy. Having an amazing wife and partner. I mean, that's really it. My wife is really supportive of everything I do. And, even when it's ridiculous and involves travel and, when I disappear on a really long training ride, a couple of times during the weekend, I mean, she's amazing. There's no way I could have done this without her, so got to give credit where credit is due. She's a large part of why I've been able to be competitive and keep the weight off. And there's also, having good time management skills, understanding a schedule and trying to figure out, when you can squeeze things in and just being efficient about it. And for example, I'm much more of a morning person. And I like to start my day with a workout. It really helps to set my day up. I get up at between 4 and 5:30 in the morning to start my workout day. And a lot of that, there's some variability there. It's hard to get up that early, and there was a long while I was getting up at 3:45 so I could be on the road at 4 a.m. To get a 2.5 hour ride in the mornings. That was pushing it a little bit. So we've adjusted. And I say we, my coach and I mostly, try to be realistic about what and how much you can do. And you need sleep, and, you can't always get to bed at a normal hour, but sleep is hugely important. And if you're not sleeping well and recovering from these really hard efforts, it's going to be hard to get up and do it again and have good results. You can do it. You can do it for a while. I did my first year of cycling without a coach, and I overtrained myself. And what happens is, without enough sleep and with too much riding and too much hard, intense riding, and it was rare that I took a day off. You just can't do that. It's just going to kill your performance. Eventually, you just feel tired and fatigued all the time. Your performance drops. You feel lethargic. It's not a good thing. So I've been lucky that my coaches helped me avoid overtraining. I think just, that's something I'm predisposed to. I'm just going to work so hard. I will just ride myself into the dirt. So we're past that one, which is great. Time management, a great wife, and, being efficient at work. Zach, we've been working for a little while in this industry, and you get better at it, man. You learn the tricks, you learn what to avoid. When you're younger, you have to just learn by brute force, and you make a lot of mistakes, and you work inefficiently because you're learning new things, and that's fine. That's part of it. Staying up, there were probably 10 years that I was staying up till 2, 3 in the morning, learning, trying new things, experimenting, learning new tools, researching. And that's part of the education process. At some point, that's a very difficult thing to sustain.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no doubt that it is a part of the process. And I went through the same thing where, I mean, you and I actually didn't even work together that long because you had gone to another place within like maybe a year or so. But you and I were usually the ones that were there until 12 a.m., 1 a.m. Like I just lived at the office and absolutely loved it. But I was 22 years old and I was learning and I was just building a reputation and trying to prove myself. And I would be like, oh, well, it's only 11 o'clock at night. I want to learn this new trick in After Effects. And I would come down to you and be like, how do you do this? Like, what's this and that? Like I was just geeking out on all that stuff. And then all of a sudden you have kids and you don't care about anything but sleep. It's like, I just want sleep. I just want to find out how to get more sleep. Like, how do I do it? And that's when you really start to realize that, like you said, sleep is important. I will go to the next level and say sleep is the most important thing you can do to hack your performance, whether it's mental performance, physical performance. If you've got your diet dialed in and your fitness dialed in and your time management dialed in, but you're not sleeping, you are just wasting all of your time on everything else. And sleep and recovery are so key. So I think that's a huge takeaway that for me, I didn't really start to nail all of these things until I started figuring out how do I actually get good quality sleep. And that was such a huge thing for me. So if we go back to when, like you're saying, all right, well, I get up at 4:30 in the morning and I do 2 hours of cycling and I start my day. I already know that the vast majority of people are saying, oh, well, then I can't do this. Like that's never going to happen. So I'm assuming that that isn't just something that you always did and you woke up at 4:30 and then watched TV for 2 hours and went on Facebook. You probably started waking up earlier to make that room. So when you said that you manage your time more efficiently, I'm a total productivity geek as far as finding ways to manage time and make sure that you're the most efficient possible. I know that you're very similar to me where you're very systematic and you figure out ways to do things as a system.
Yeah, here's my main motivating factor. I'm lazy. So I want to do the thing that I don't like as efficiently as possible. And I'm maybe a little nuts about this. I mean, even like, loading the dishwasher, the pattern that I load the dishwasher, I want to do it the fastest way possible. May not be the best way, but it'll be the fastest way. Same thing with, loading the grocery bags. I love bagging groceries. Why? Because it's like, to me, it's like three-dimensional Tetris. I want to fit it in 4 bags. I want to distribute the densities exactly right, quickly. I want to get my groceries in 4 bags, double bag it, and have them full. So I'm being as least wasteful as possible. Yeah, I mean, I make all these little games out of it in terms of the efficiency, but mostly so I have the time to do the kinds of things that I like. I mean, I think it's kind of fun to give myself these challenges, these time efficiency challenges. It makes it like a game. And for me, that kind of that approach by gamifying, maybe because I grew up with two brothers and we were always competitive and played a lot of video games. For me, that helps.
It's so funny that you brought up the dishwashing thing. I don't remember when this was. It was maybe a couple of years ago. But you put a picture on Facebook that was a diagram of the most efficient way to fill a dishwasher. Yeah. And I didn't actually type this, but I would have just put it in the comments field. I love you, Jim Reed. Because you are so a man after my own heart, where my wife is the polar opposite of me. She has no ability with spatial relations whatsoever, and I love her to death. But I'll open the dishwasher, and I just hang my head. I'm like, oh, my God. I can't deal with this, right? Because I'm really OCD about how things are organized. Like I grew up on Tetris. All I did for like a decade was play Tetris. So that's just the way my brain works. And I actually think it's a real reason why I'm very good at what I do for a living, because I just play Tetris for a living in front of a timeline in Avid. Like that's all I do is play Tetris. But it's so funny because I still think about that picture that you posted about here's how to load a dishwasher. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Somebody else gets me,
Yeah, it's pretty funny. And to circle it back to the sleep thing, Everybody has different requirements, and I when I'm training, I'm getting up between 4 and 5:30 in the morning. It's not immediately easy to get up that early. There's a way to do it if you want to, and the flip side to that is everybody's different. So if you're I'm more of a morning person. I'm going to do better in the morning. I just know that about myself. If you're more of a night person, then work with it. So I think the reason why I've been able to maintain some success with all this stuff is I realize my own limitations and then work with them rather than against them. Because if you try and fight yourself on something like, if I try and do my workouts at night, it's just not going to work out very well for me. What happens to me is I go work out and then I'm stoked, I'm jazzed, I'm all pumped up, the endorphins are going, and then I can't get to sleep. And then I get up later and then I feel like crap. And, so for me, that just doesn't work. So if I know I need to get up early, I try and get to bed, at a reasonable hour and just do it slowly. So, I might just get up a little bit earlier each day, 15 minutes earlier, not by that much, because what can happen is if you try and do too much, then, you might not be able to do the 4 a.m. thing right away. But eventually, if you do it for a couple of weeks, you're going to be on that schedule. And here's the amazing thing. If you go and work out really hard, you're going to be tired. You're going to be tired at night, no matter what. If you put your time in. I used to have a lot of sleeping problems too. I know you mentioned that. And the easy solution was exercise. If you work hard, even for just an hour, if you work really hard. So, if I only have a short amount of time, I'll dial up the intensity. If I only know I have an hour, I'll go pretty hard. And, I'm able to kind of maintain that sleep schedule and get up that early. If I've had a couple of weeks to adjust, then you don't even need an alarm anymore. You just start waking up.
Yeah, and that's the experience that I've had where I've never been a morning person. I grew up on a farm, and growing up on a farm and not being a morning person is just like the worst hell on earth, because everything on a farm starts at 4 and 5 a.m. and you wake up and you take care of the animals. And
Zach, I think the universe is telling you something. You're an editor.
Right? So yeah, it was the worst experience ever, and it took me years to figure out how do I actually get up in the morning. And obviously when you have kids, that's just like you have no choice because they're going to wake up whenever they wake up. And it was like 3 or 4 years of just the worst hell trying to figure out how do I function when I have to be waking up at 5 and 6 in the morning with the kids, and it wasn't working. And what I discovered was that I have to stop worrying about the amount of sleep. And let me just preface this by saying the amount of sleep you get is incredibly important. But I was at a point where I was saying, I know for this period of time when my kids are babies, I'm just not going to get 8 hours. It's never going to happen. So I just need to accept that and know that I have to improve the quality of my sleep. And I started learning all these different little changes you can make. Because if you're just thinking, well, I just need to wake up earlier, it's never going to work. Willpower is very finite and a very weak thing that you have. But if you develop systems and strategies, that's when you can start to actually become more of a morning person. And now I'm up like a bullet at about 6 a.m. in the morning, which has never been me my entire life. So it's not like my natural circadian rhythm. And some of the really, really simple hacks that I can give people that don't cost any money and are just part of my daily routine are: number one, I make sure that for at least 30 minutes to an hour before I know my head's going to hit the pillow, I have no screens in front of me and I don't have any full spectrum lights, meaning I don't have lights on in the house. All I'm using are red lights. I've replaced all the light bulbs like in my office with red light bulbs, where at night my room is just red because I'm not exposing myself to the blue spectrum of light, which will reset your circadian rhythms. Another thing that I do this every morning and every night now, is I just take a cold shower, which means I don't even turn the hot on at all. I just turn on the cold water and get under it. And that is an amazing, amazing way to just lower your core body temperature. And by the time you hit the pillow, you don't even remember that you hit the pillow. You wake up 7 hours later and you're like, oh, wait a second, I feel refreshed. And that cold water helps a lot. And the third thing that I do pretty much without fail, no matter what time I go to bed, even if I'm working until 2 in the morning because I have no choice and I'm under deadline, is I will do a meditation practice for 15 or 20 minutes or a yoga practice right before bed. That slows me down. It slows down my thoughts. And by the time I'm ready to go to the bed, I essentially sleepwalk from the area where I do this to my bed. And most times when I wake up in the morning, I don't even remember that I walked to my bed. And there will be times where I'm so deep in this state where I will actually fall asleep doing this. And then I'll wake up in the room at like 2 in the morning and be like, oh my God, I didn't even walk to bed. Right. But I get full, complete sleep cycles, and I actually have an app on my phone called Sleep Cycle Alarm Clock that you just put under your pillow. I put my phone in airplane mode, which is another huge hack, is you don't want your phone charging next to you with all of the EMFs going right next to your brain, because that screws up your sleep cycle as well. So I look at my sleep score and say, oh, well, this is how many times I moved. This is where I got into a deep sleep cycle. I was in a shallow sleep cycle here. And how can I just change and tweak my routine? And then one of the other big things that I do that, again, is also free, so I've developed a system where I take like 15 to 20 minutes at night and look at what are all the things I need to do the next day, right? So I already know when I wake up, here's what I'm doing. So I'm never thinking, oh my God, what do I have to do tomorrow? Have I done this yet? Have I taken care of this? I have no worries because I've either completed all of my actions by the end of that day, or if I haven't, I've sat down for 15 minutes and strategized and said, all right, well, what am I going to do when I wake up? What am I going to do when I get to work? Then I don't have to think about anything. So I sleep like a rock. And my wife is like, did you know our daughter woke up 3 times last night and wet the bed? Nope, I had no idea. But I'm out like a rocket at 6 or 6:30 in the morning because I have all of these things that are improving the depth of my sleep. So those are some really simple ways to just, like you said, you have to build that momentum. And sometimes it's this vicious cycle where you say, well, exercise is the best hack on the planet for sleep, but I need to get sleep to have the energy to exercise. So I'm just going to give up and I don't know where to start. But if you can do some of these simple things and all of a sudden you wake up with energy, now you're like, oh, maybe I do have some time to go take a walk, or maybe I'll take a jog or take a spinning class. And then all of a sudden you really experience the deep sleep that you get when you do intense exercise. And that is the best feeling on the planet.
Oh yeah, it's great when your head hits the pillow after a long hard day, and you're zonked until the moment you wake up, and you get that really deep quality sleep. It's just so important for so many reasons. For a lot of our bodily systems, and for many years, it then start, like, once you start getting that quality sleep, what I noticed is, wow. For the last 10 years, I have not slept at all. My sleep quality has been terrible. And you're able to maintain that momentum throughout the day. You just feel better. You feel better when you wake up, and that all makes it easier to get up and get out there, and then make it through the day and kick ass, and then have some time to hang with the family. Absolutely.
Yeah. Exactly. And whenever people say, oh, hey, I heard you're into productivity and all this other stuff, like what's the number one tip? What's the best tip? And they're thinking it's like, oh, well, use this app, or use the Pomodoro technique, or here's Evernote, or whatever it is. And like, learn how to sleep. Because once you learn how to sleep, all the dominoes start to fall into place. But if you're trying to figure out these little tiny tactics in this app and that app and whatever it is, but if you haven't figured out sleep yet, nothing's really going to fall into place. And that was the magic pill for me. And there are things that you can spend money on that are going to improve the quality of your sleep. But for the most part, it's just implementing these really simple, common practices and routines, all of which are free. So if you're thinking, I just want one simple place to start, just focus on getting better sleep. And once you do that, then you can start to stack on top of that and do more things that are going to help your productivity, help your time management, give you more energy. Then you're going to, like you said, build that momentum and that motivation to start eating better, to start exercising. So that, to me, is really kind of the number one place to start. So I'm glad that ended up coming up, because I wasn't even thinking we were going to talk about that today, but I think that's a really, really great point to make.
So it's not all good news, though. So here's the dark side to being very competitive and falling in love with cycling is I had to, make my way up the ranks of amateur cycling and compete against guys who have been cycling their entire lives and are animals, and, maybe retired or spend the winter in Arizona training, or do fancy, amazing training camps in Italy. I don't get to do any of that. So where I'm at right now with my racing is I'm competing at the masters level against these guys who are just animals, and I'm getting my ass handed to me. So, we'll be adjusting some training and maybe some results expectations. But along with that, I've also suffered some pretty terrible injuries. And, again, it's great. I think that I've found something that I love and have kept the weight off, and this has gotten me into a pretty good routine. But I've now had a broken clavicle and surgery to repair that with a titanium plate. I then rebroke that same clavicle and basically destroyed everything in my shoulder and had to have that rebuilt. And I am, as we speak, nursing a broken hand, though in contrast to the other injuries, the broken hand's like nothing. I broke my hand on a mountain bike training ride, got home, went upstairs, apologized to my wife. I was like, look, I'm going to make breakfast for you guys, and then I got to drive myself to the hospital because I just broke my hand. And she's like, oh, man, come on.
Yeah, and I've seen all the pictures on Facebook to prove it, which is part of the reason I was so excited about this call. Because, like I said, Renaissance man / badass, and you keep going through, you do the cycling, and then all of a sudden on Facebook, hey, here's me in traction, or hey, here's my new cast for the day. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and the injuries are really tough. You have to take a break. You have to let your body heal, and the pain and the pain management. I will say this: I was not prepared for the pain and the recovery time that a broken clavicle involves. When you have to have surgical repair, and I'm not a huge fan of surgeries. In fact, this latest injury, the hand injury, the broken hand, my doctor offered to fix it surgically, and I was like, no, we're not going to do that. So what can we do? And we literally did nothing. And guess what? Bones heal just fine by themselves sometimes under the right circumstances. Work with your doctor if you have an injury. But yeah, when you have surgery, it's a really big deal. It takes a long time to heal. And the pain management can be really terrible. Along with that, your sleep is going to get disrupted. I can only sleep on my right side now, probably forever. My left shoulder is just so jacked up. That's created some interesting challenges in trying to get quality sleep. And then the pain meds that are just so easy to get and so dangerous. I was lucky. I had them for my procedures to help manage the pain, and they did work, and it was easy enough for me to get off of them. But I have a lot of friends who developed really serious drug addictions out of pain medication for things that were really necessary. It's sketchy, man, really sketchy. So I do nothing now. But pain management is nothing. I don't even do ibuprofen anymore. As some of my research had turned up that it could interfere with bone mending, and so it's just nothing. Just maybe a little meditation,
Right?
And that's it.
It's all part of the journey, and I haven't experienced quite the severity of the injuries that you have, but I know I've experienced my share of them through doing Spartan races or doing the martial arts that I've done, and I wouldn't trade any of it for the world or change any of it. I'm guessing you'd probably say just about the same thing. So.
Yeah, I'm definitely adjusting the kinds of races that I'm doing, and not being as aggressive as I was when I, started this renaissance in cycling. There are races called criteriums, really dangerous, really fast in urban environments, 4 corners, short course, and very, very competitive. And you have people who want to win, and they will put themselves into very dangerous positions. I'm learning how to avoid those kinds of races and still feel physically challenged and be safe. That's important because when I suffer these injuries, it's not just me that suffers. It's the family and work, and it's a big deal. So we're still figuring that one out.
Yeah, well, it's always an endless process of experimentation and finding the balance. And I think there's a lot of really good motivational stuff in this show and steps that people can take, but just hearing that it can be done with people that have our schedules and work in our industry, I think is really, really inspirational. So I'm really, really glad that we were able to have this conversation and finally catch up. If people want to see an example of some of the work that you've done or your story, where can we send people? Like, what's a good website for them to start with?
Sure. I have a website, jim-reed.com, and that's Reed, R-E-A-D. And that's where I've collected a portfolio of work that I've done over the ages. And yeah, you can check out some of the work there. And if you are on Strava, you can find me and follow me.
Yeah, and if anybody goes to that site, they're going to see some bad-ass work, because you do just some of the most top-notch graphic work that I've seen in the industry. And having said that 15 years ago, that meant nothing, and I didn't realize just the quality of work that you brought to something. But now that I've been in the industry for 15 years, like you do like top-notch stuff. So if anybody here is a designer and they don't give two craps about cycling, but they want to see some good design work, go to this site.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for being on the show. I'm glad that we were able to catch up, and hopefully we can inspire a few people to take some steps towards better health.
You bet. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to episode 50 of the Fitness and Post podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to access any of the resources discussed, visit our show notes at fitnessandpost.com/50. If you're looking for ways to get more motivated to be more active at the office or elsewhere, I highly suggest that you check out our Fitness and Post Fitbit leaderboard, which now has almost 200 members. All you need to do is track your activity to win great prizes from our awesome sponsors, which include Adobe, Boris Effects, which now includes Mocha, GenArts, the creator of the Sapphire plugin package, G-Tech, Calton Nutrition, Isotope, and That Studio. To learn more, just visit fitnessandpost.com/Fitbit. Lastly, if you haven't checked it out yet, I highly recommend a visit to the Fitness and Post store, where we have listed all the products and resources that we use on a regular basis that help us to not only survive this industry, but thrive. To see all the great stuff that we recommend, including exercise equipment for the office, supplements, books and movies, and many other items, just visit store.fitnessandpost.com. Thank you for listening. Be well.